This is the morning sports desk for Thursday, July 27th. So the Minnesota Twins were back in action yesterday, and let's just say things did not go very well. They lost 8-7 against the Seattle Mariners. They dropped the series, but they did go 4-2 on the homestand. So, hey, 4-2 homestand, a 5-2 road trip. That's still a pretty good record. They're 9-4 since the All-Star break. Not necessarily the best record in baseball anymore since that time, but still a good run. Gets them back into place, and now they have a weekend series against Kansas City. Go win at least 2 out of 3 against the Royals, and let's figure things out after that. Now, we'll kind of just see how things play out. The trade deadline is starting to heat up a little bit. The big news in Major League Baseball is that Shohei Ohtani is not going to be traded. The best player in baseball, probably of all time, is not going to be traded. He's going to stay with the Angels, and the Angels are competing, actually. They're buying at the trade deadline, not selling, because they went all in and traded for Lucas Giolito, the White Sox starting pitcher, who's given the Twins a whole heck of a lot of fits throughout his time in the south side of Chicago. So seeing him go in an Angels uniform is a welcome sight, but the Twins do play the Angels in late September. Either way, so there's been some moves across baseball. There's been some minor trades here and there. The Guardians traded for starting pitcher Noah Syndergaard from the Los Angeles Dodgers, and there's a couple other moves here and there. The Twins have also gotten into the trade mix, but really, do they need a starting pitcher? Probably not, considering their rotation is still good. But Joe Ryan has been flubbing as of late. He's been giving up a lot of home runs, and here's what Rocco Baldelli had to say about his starting pitcher.
Long out. I don't know how many innings or outs Joe ended up going, but he had to work very hard. He threw a ton of foul balls. He had to throw a lot of pitches. It never felt like anything was easy. It was all hard, and that happens. I mean, it's not like he was out there walking everybody, and that's why his pitch count was high. I don't know how many walks, 2 walks. I mean, it's not walks. It's just, finishing at bats. And he had to work very hard. That's why, he threw a lot of pitches that last inning, and we just had to get him out of there.
Yeah, there's manager Rocco Baldelli talking about Joe Ryan. Gave up a lot of home runs, gave up a lot of runs. Twins lose 8-7. The one thing you could say, the starting pitching is regressing. That's not good. And maybe they are. I don't know. I can't speak on behalf of that. But one thing is the offense is starting to pick itself up a little bit, and you've been seeing it through guys like Ed Julian, Alex Kirilloff, Max Kepler. Those guys have been hitting, gotten some timely hits from Carlos Correa, although not as many, obviously, as we all would like. But we're also seeing it come from another young left-handed hitting corner outfielder. His name is Matt Wallner.
Hit well into right field. Might have a chance to get up and out of here. Matt Wallner with his 3rd of the year, and the Twins trail 4-3. That ball's hit well into left field, and that ball's going to look up, and that's gone. Matt Wallner showing some power. Opposite way, upper deck. Wow. Wallner's second of the game, first career 2-homer game for Matt Wallner.
Matt Wallner had himself a pretty darn good game, as you just heard Dan Gladden on the radio call. 2-homer game, and that second home run he hit deep into the left center field gap. It was in the second deck, right above the bullpen, and not a lot of people get to that spot in the ballpark, and especially not a lot of left-handed hitters, hitting it into left center field like that. So again, Matt Wallner starting to flash a little bit. The Twins lineup showing just a little bit of life. Now, again, the strikeouts are still high. You still obviously don't want that. But at the same time, you are starting to see a little bit more of the runs come across. And when you see more of the runs come across, you can start to look the other way on the strikeouts. Obviously, they're not ideal. But when you're scoring runs, you're kind of like, well, I'm not going to argue with results. And that's kind of where the Twins are at right now. Now, speaking of the trade deadline, the Twins did make a couple trades, or well, really just one trade, but it's going to be the start of a couple trades. And that was trading relief pitcher Jorge Lopez, not to be confused with starting pitcher Pablo Lopez. Jorge Lopez, who was in the Twins bullpen, the Twins traded for him to be their closer at last year's trade deadline. And now the Twins are getting him out of here. They're shipping him to Miami in exchange for Dylan Floro. And who the heck is Dylan Floro? He's just a guy. He's just a random relief pitcher that the Twins got. He's bounced around from the Cubs, the Dodgers. I think he had some time with the Braves. He's been with a few different organizations in Major League Baseball. If you want to know a little bit more about Dylan Floro, the new Twins bullpen arm that they just got, he's not going to be a closer. He's not necessarily a high leverage type role, or at least he likely won't be put in that right away. He's probably going to slot, if you were to put the Twins bullpen hierarchy, there's Yohan Duran, who's 1 and above. Then you have Griffin Jax. And when they come back, Caleb Thielbar, Brock Stewart, kind of maybe flip that. And then you could maybe get to Dylan Floro, and you have your Balazovics, and you have your Pagans and your Morans. That's kind of where the Twins bullpen is shaking out. And then your Josh Winder somewhere in there as well. So he's not necessarily a top end, but he's not a bum necessarily. But he's got some saves in his career, so that is something to his credit. He has pitched in high leverage innings. I don't know if necessarily that's the role the Twins are going to use him in, as a high leverage exclusive reliever, but is he an upgrade from Jorge Lopez? Probably. He doesn't have a lot of high velocity. He doesn't throw the ball 101 like Duran does. He doesn't have a lot of spin rate. He doesn't necessarily have wicked movement on his pitches, but he keeps the ball in the ballpark. In 317 career innings pitched, he's only given up 18 home runs, which is really good. And he's only given up 2 home runs all season long. He has a sneaky decent stat called fielding independent pitching. And basically what it says, it's just kind of a way to tell how good you've been pitching, to try and factor out, if you have a good defense or a bad defense. And it's a way just to kind of figure how well the pitcher specifically has been pitching. He has a 4.5 ERA. So that's high for a reliever. But the sneaky decent 2.78 FIP, around, if you have like a FIP of under 3, you're sitting pretty good. I know it's a new stat, not everybody quite understands it, but in 39 2/3 innings, he has a 4.5 ERA. But basically what the FIP says is, yeah, the ERA is high, but he's pitching better than that. Like expect him. ERA is showing of past results, and like, hey, in the past he averages this many runs per 9 innings. And what FIP says is, okay, well, like, here's projecting forward. Like, based on his numbers, we think he's actually going to get better. We think that he hasn't been pitching as bad as what the kind of stats show, the recording stats show, or whatever. I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's escaping me right now. So that is Dylan Floro. Now, what does this say about the Jorge Lopez trade? Because I think the Twins basically are just waving the white flag. They're taking, as the kids say, the L on this one. They're done. They're like, we're not going to get anything out of Jorge Lopez. He was brought in to be the closer. The Twins gave up Ynier Cano, who was just a random guy in the Twins bullpen, but became an all-star in Baltimore's bullpen. Credit to Cano and credit to the Orioles. But the Twins also gave up a prospect called Cade Povich, a starting pitching prospect, and I believe one other random minor leaguer in the deal. So the Twins basically lit those prospects on fire. Not necessarily that all of them are going to be dominant forces for years to come, but just to say that you lit those prospects on fire and you don't get to use them in a trade for somebody else. You don't get to use them for yourself. And basically all you got back is Dylan Floro in the deal. Which is not something that the Twins probably would have did. So the Twins are taking the L on this trade, but I do give them credit for just admitting that they lost. And sometimes that's, I think, can be their weakness when you talk about Emilio Pagan and when you talk about some of these other players that they have, where it's like, just move on. Like, move on from them. What are you holding on to these guys for? So good on the Twins for just getting rid of Jorge Lopez and ripping the Band-Aid off and just giving him a change of scenery. And all the best to Jorge Lopez. He had some mental health issues he needed to work out. He missed some time this year. He's got a kid who's very, I don't know if deathly sick is the right word, but very sick, or has like a very chronic condition. and they go to Miami a lot for treatment. So for him to go down there and all the best to Jorge Lopez, it just didn't work in Minnesota. The expectations were too high for him, and he likely was never really good enough to meet those expectations. But Dylan Floro is a guy the Twins can use. They still are going to get more bullpen pieces, though, because you essentially just swapped out one bad arm for a semi-decent arm, but you're going to need more. You're going to need at least one more bullpen arm, preferably a left-handed pitcher. We'll see if the Twins go that route. We'll see if the Twins go more the route of getting a right-handed hitter. But again, I think as the series against Seattle showed us with the bullpen implosions that the Twins need more help in the bullpen. And I know Caleb Thielbar and Brock Stewart are making their way back, and I think Caleb Thielbar is going to travel to Kansas City. And then I think Brock Stewart is going to start a rehab assignment soon in the minors, but you're gonna need more help in all of this, because it is just it's not going to be good if you can't figure this out. So that's the deal with the Twins. Let's take a look now at the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins at training camp talking about his old pal Harrison Smith. Here's just a funny quote I found.
Shredded cheese on a plate and microwave it, and then I'll just eat it. This was years ago. This was a few years ago, but I'm like, I've never done that, So, and he would probably deny that, or I probably got that wrong. But that just gives you a hint into some of the stuff where you're like, really? Okay, it's pretty good for a world-class athlete. So he's got a few deals, but it works for him. And I think part of what works for him is that he knows what works, and he's not gonna try to reinvent himself.
Yeah, there's Kirk Cousins talking about Harrison Smith, who just, I guess, likes to melt cheese in the microwave and eat it. I guess, and not even any chips on it. So that's a little weird. Anyway, Vikings started their first full training camp practice yesterday. They're going to continue practice today. First preseason game, August 10th against the Seattle Seahawks. But up until then, the big storyline early in training camp, don't hold too much stock into highlights you see or bad plays you see early in training camp. Everybody's trying to get their feet wet and get their feet underneath them and just get ready for the season. There is one thing, though, that you can track early in training camp, and that's extensions. Contract extensions typically happen early in training camp. And the reason that they happen early in training camp is because players want to get them done before they get hurt, and teams want to get them done as soon as possible, just to get the cloud over their head and to make sure that they kind of have some good PR early in training camp. TJ Hockenson, Danielle Hunter, Justin Jefferson are the three guys who want extensions. Danielle Hunter showed up to camp. Will he get an extension? That remains to be seen. TJ Hockenson should definitely get an extension. He's Kirk Cousins' number 2 target and definitely number 1 red zone target. And Justin Jefferson, of course, should get an extension because he's Justin Jefferson. But what is the hierarchy that you put them at? I would say Justin Jefferson, obviously, far and away, you make sure he's extended first, although he still has a whole nother year, and then one until he becomes a free agent. So Justin Jefferson still has 2 more years in Minnesota before he becomes a free agent. So it's not necessarily at the forefront like this needs to happen today, but it's something that probably should happen just to get it out and done and move on. But TJ Hockenson is number 2. But if you're going to rank it based on this offseason, you should probably re-sign Hockenson. And then there's Danielle Hunter, who maybe is the interesting domino, and you could make a case for him being at number 1 in the sense of, well, if they know what they're doing with Danielle Hunter, it kind of helps the other dominoes fall. If they commit to Danielle Hunter, then they have to kind of finagle salary cap because they're going to have to extend Jefferson and Hockenson. Because I believe that the Vikings will extend Jefferson and Hockenson at some point. For sure, Jefferson. I'm like 85% sure on Hockenson, and it's like a 50-50 coin flip on what they do with Danielle Hunter. But that's kind of where the Vikings sit with their extensions. I would rank Jefferson, Hockenson, Hunter in terms of extensions priority as a player. In terms of more just probably practicality, logistically, you probably want to make sure you get a Hunter extension, or at least figure out Hunter first, then get to Hockenson, and then you can break the piggy bank for Justin Jefferson. This has been the Morning Sports Desk for Thursday, July 27th. 7:32 on KWAD. Here's MNN News.
Minnesota News Network. I'm Brent Palm. Thousands packed Shields Arena in Fargo Wednesday.